Now, speaking of warmer temperatures, the Weather Service office in Blacksburg is making some changes to their heat advisory criteria. Take a look. It's important to note that these adjustments will only impact folks living in Greenbrier, Mercer, Monroe, and Summers County. The heat advisory will be issued when the heat index is forecast to hit 100 instead of 105. And with an excessive heat warning, the threshold goes down from 110 degrees to 105 degrees. The most heat advisories issued for our mountain counties along Route 219 and the Greenbrier Valley was the summer of 2012. Now, while there could be more issued in the future because of the lower threshold, the decision to make this adjustment was backed by emergency management and many health officials.
The data that we obtained from Virginia, which is probably relevant to our southeast West Virginia counties, found that there were people being treated for heat-related illnesses below our current criteria, which was 110 for excessive heat warning and 105 for a heat advisory. Based on that, and looking at the climatology, you look at Lewisburg and Bluefield, there have only been 3 summers since 1973 that Lewisburg has had a heat index at or above 100, and they've never had a heat index measured at 105 or greater. And for Bluefield, it's only been once since 1973. So when you look at the climatology and the supporting data from the Department of Health, that's really what drove that decision.
I know the first heat wave of the season can trigger the most health-related issues because we're not acclimated to the combination of high heat and humidity. Now, when we approach that first heat wave of the season, does your office tend to issue heat advisories even if that threshold is not going to be met?
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Chad. So there is flexibility in those guidelines. If we, as well as the other offices surrounding us and coordinate, feel that a heat advisory or excessive heat warning is needed, even with lower values than what are listed in the criteria, we do have that option.
I noticed many colleges are turning to the wet bulb globe temperature to get an assessment of heat stress for their sports players. It factors in temperature, cloud cover, and wind in direct sunlight. Do you see the wet bulb globe temperature gaining traction and maybe replacing the heat index scale for heat advisory and excessive heat warning criteria anytime soon?
I think the two coexist and they're used differently, and I totally agree, Chad, that we're seeing the wet bulb globe temperature being used much more, especially, as you said, by higher education for any outdoor events. But what we find with the heat index, which, like you said, does not take into account the incoming solar radiation or wind, can be a good tool to forecast the potential impacts for heat, whereas the wet bulb globe temperature, I think, is a really good measure as it's happening, because the wet bulb globe temperature can vary tremendously over a very short distance. If you think about a football stadium and where it's cloudy on one side of the stadium, the wet bulb globe temperature could be tremendously different than the other side, and that is so difficult to forecast. So I think we could have something like the worst case scenario wet bulb globe temperature as a forecast, have that combined with the heat index as more of a forecast tool, and the wet bulb globe temperature being more of a measurement tool of what's happening currently.
And thank you so much, Phil Heisel with the National Weather Service in Blacksburg. Now, this change will mean more heat-related advisories will be issued. Hopefully, people will heed the message, hydrate, avoid strenuous activity during the hottest part of the day, and as a result, hopefully, the ER will see fewer people due to heat-related illnesses. Of course, we'll keep you abreast of any heat that is in our 7-day forecast as we work forward through the summer. Chief Meteorologist Chad Merrill reporting for Newswatch.